Chapter 2 The New World. The Founding of Kel'Thalas. Duskwood, Scholomance, Darkshore. The High Elves, led by Dathramar, left Kalimdor behind them and challenged the storms of the Maelstrom. Their fleets wandered the wreckage of the world for many long years, and they discovered mysteries and lost kingdoms along their sojourn. Dathramar, who had taken the name Sunstrider, or He Who Walks the Day, sought out places of considerable lay power upon which to build a new homeland for his people. His fleet finally landed on the beaches of the kingdom men would later call Lordaeron. Forging inland, the High Elves founded a settlement within the tranquil Tearsful Glades. After a few years, many of them began to go mad. It was theorized that something evil slept beneath that particular part of the world, but the rumors were never proven to be true. The High Elves packed up their encampment and moved northward towards another land rich with ley energies. As the High Elves crossed the rugged mountainous lands of Lordaeron, their journey became more perilous. Since they were effectively cut off from the life-giving energies of the Well of Eternity, many of them fell ill from the frigid climate or died from starvation. The most disconcerting change, however, was the fact that they were no longer immortal or immune to the elements. They also shrank somewhat in height, and their skin lost its characteristic violet hue. Despite their hardships, they encountered many wondrous creatures that had never been seen in Kalimdor. They also found tribes of primitive humans who hunted throughout the ancient forest lands. However, the direst threat they encountered were the voracious and cunning forest trolls of Zul-Aman. These moss-skinned trolls could regenerate lost limbs and heal grievous physical injuries, but they proved to be a barbaric, evil race. The Amani Empire stretched across most of northern Lordaeron, and the trolls fought hard to keep unwanted strangers from their borders. The elves developed a deep loathing for the vicious trolls and killed them on sight whenever they were encountered. After many long years, the High Elves finally found a land which was reminiscent of Kalimdor. Deep within the northern forests of the continent, they founded the kingdom of Kel'Thalas and vowed to create a mighty empire which would dwarf that of their Kaldori cousins. Unfortunately, they soon learned that Kel'Thalas was founded upon an ancient troll city that the trolls still held to be sacred. Almost immediately, the trolls began to attack the 11 settlements en masse. The stubborn elves, unwilling to give up their new land, utilized the magics which they had gleaned from the Well of Eternity and kept the savage trolls at bay. Under Dathramar's leadership, they were able to defeat the Amani warbands that outnumbered them 10-1. Some elves, wary of the Kaldori's ancient warnings, felt that their use of magic might possibly draw the attention to the banished Burning Legion. Therefore, they decided to mask their lands within a protective barrier which would still allow them to work their enchantments. They constructed a series of monolithic runestones at various points around Kel'Thalas, which marked the boundaries of the magic barrier. The runestones not only masked the elves' magic from extra-dimensional threats, but helped to frighten away the superstitious troll warbands as well. As time wore on, Kel'Thalas became a shining monument to the High Elves' efforts in magical prowess. Its beauteous palaces were crafted in the same architectural style as the ancient halls of Kalimdor, yet they were interwoven with the natural topography of the land. Kel'Thalas had become the shining jewel that the elves had longed to create. The Convocation of Silvermoon was founded as the ruling power over Kel'Thalas, though the Sunstrider dynasty maintained a modicum of political power. Comprised of 7 of the greatest High Elf lords, the Convocation worked to secure the safety of the elven lands and people. Surrounded by their protective barrier, the High Elves remained unmoved by the old warnings of the Kaldori and continued to use magic flagrantly in almost all aspects of their lives. For nearly 4,000 years, the High Elves lived peacefully within the secluded safety of their kingdom. Nevertheless, the vindictive trolls were not so easily defeated. They plotted and schemed in the depths of the forest and waited for the numbers of their warbands to grow. Finally, a mighty troll army charged out from the shadowy forests and once again laid siege to the shining spires of Kel'Thalas. Arathor and the Troll Wars, Ilsbert Foothills, Ironforge, Scarlet Monastery. As the High Elves fought for their lives against the trolls' fierce onslaught, the scattered, nomadic humans of Lordaeron fought to consolidate their own tribal lands. The tribes of early humanity raided each other's settlements with little heed for racial unification or honor. Yet one tribe, known as the Arathi, saw the trolls were becoming too great a threat to ignore. The Arathi wished to bring all of the tribes under its rule so that they could provide a unified front against the troll warbands. Over the course of 6 years, the cunning Arathi outmaneuvered and outfought the rival tribes. After every victory, the Arathi offered peace and equality to the conquered people. Thus, they won the loyalty of those they had beaten. Eventually, the Arathi came to include many disparate tribes, and the ranks of its army grew vast. Confident that they could hold their own against the troll warbands, or even the reclusive elves if need be, the Arathi warlords decided to construct a mighty fortress city in the southern regions of Lordaeron. The city-state, named Strom, became the capital of the Arathi nation, Arathor. As Arathor prospered, humans from all over the vast continent traveled south to the protection and safety of Strom. United under one banner, the human tribes developed a strong, optimistic culture. Thoradin, the king of Arathor, knew that the mysterious elves in the Northlands were under constant siege by the trolls, but refused to risk the safety of his people in defense of reclusive strangers. Many months passed as rumors of the elves' supposed defeat trickled down from the north. It was only when weary ambassadors from Kel'Thalas reached Strom that Thoradin realized how great the troll threat truly was. The elves informed Thoradin that the troll armies were vast and that once the trolls had destroyed Kel'Thalas, they would move on to attack the Southlands. The desperate elves, in dire need of military aid, hastily agreed to teach certain select humans to wield magic in exchange for their help against the warbands. Thoradin, distrustful of any magic, agreed to aid the elves out of necessity. Almost immediately, elven sorcerers arrived in Arathor and began to instruct a group of humans in the ways of magic. The elves found that although humans were innately clumsy in their handling of magic, they possessed a startling natural affinity for it. 100 men were taught the very basics of the elves' magical secrets, no more than was absolutely necessary to combat the trolls. Convinced that their human students were ready to aid in the struggle, the elves left Strom and traveled north alongside the mighty armies of King Thoradin. The united elf and human armies clashed against the overwhelming troll warbands at the foot of the Alterac Mountains. The battle lasted for many days, but the unflagging armies of Arathor never tired or gave an inch of ground before the troll onslaught. The elven lords deemed that the time had come to release the powers of their magic upon the enemy. The 100 human magi and a multitude of elven sorcerers called down the fury of the heavens and set the troll armies ablaze. The elemental fires prevented the trolls from regenerating their wounds and burned their tortured forms from the inside out. As the troll armies broke and attempted to flee, Thoradin's armies ran them down and slaughtered every last one of their soldiers. The trolls would never fully recover from their defeat, and history would never see the trolls rise as one nation again. Assured that Kel'Thalas was saved from destruction, the elves made a pledge of loyalty and friendship to the nation of Arathor and to the bloodline of its king, Thoradin. Humans and elves would nurture peaceful relations for ages to come. The Guardians of Tirisfal, Stormwind City. With the absence of trolls in the Northlands, the elves of Kel'Thalas bent their efforts towards rebuilding their glorious homeland. The victorious armies of Arathor returned home to Southlands of Strom. The human society of Arathor grew and prospered, yet Thoradin, fearful that his kingdom would splinter apart if it overextended itself, maintained that Strom was the center of the Arathorian Empire. After many peaceful years of growth and commerce, mighty Thoradin died of old age, leaving Arathor's younger generation free to expand the empire beyond the lands of Strom. The original 100 magi, who were tutored in the ways of magic by the elves, expanded their powers and studied the mystic disciplines of spell-weaving in much greater detail. These magi, initially chosen for their strong wills and noble spirits, had always practiced their magic with care and responsibility. However, they passed their secrets and powers onto a newer generation that had no concept of the rigors of war or the necessity for self-restraint. These younger magicians began to practice magic for personal gain rather than out of any responsibility towards their fellows. As the empire grew and expanded into new lands, the young magicians also spread out into the Southlands. Wielding their mystical powers, the magicians protected their brethren from the wild creatures of the land and made it possible for new city-states to be constructed in the wilderness. Yet, as their powers grew, the magicians became ever more conceited and isolated from the rest of society. The second Arathorian city-state of Dalaran was founded in the lands north of Strom. Many fledgling wizards left the restraining confines of Strom behind and traveled to Dalaran, where they hoped to use their new powers with greater freedom. These magicians used their skills to build up the enchanted spires of Dalaran and reveled in the pursuit of their studies. The citizens of Dalaran tolerated the magicians' endeavors and built up a bustling economy under the protection of their magic-using defenders. Yet, as more and more magicians practiced their arts, the fabric of reality around Dalaran began to weaken and tear. The sinister agents of the Burning Legion, who had been banished when the Well of Eternity collapsed, were lured back into the world by the heedless spellcasting of the magicians of Dalaran. Though these relatively weak demons did not appear in force, they did sow considerable confusion and chaos within the streets of Dalaran. Most of these demonic encounters were isolated events, and the ruling magocrats did what they could to keep such events hidden from the public. The most powerful magicians were sent to capture the elusive demons, but they often found themselves hopelessly outmatched by the lone agents of the mighty legion. After a few months, the superstitious peasantry began to suspect that their sorceress rulers were hiding something terrible from them. Rumors of revolution began to sweep through the streets of Dalaran as the paranoid citizenry questioned the motives and practices of the magicians they had once admired. The magocrats, fearing that the peasants would revolt and that Strom would take action against them, turned to the only group they felt would understand their particular problem: the elves. Upon hearing the magocrats' news of demonic activity in Dalaran, the elves quickly dispatched their mightiest wizards to the human lands. The elven wizards studied the energy currents in Dalaran and made detailed reports of all the demonic activity that they beheld. They concluded that although there were only a few demons loose in the world, the Legion would itself remain a dire threat so long as humans continued to wield the forces of magic. The Council of Silvermoon, which ruled over the elves of Kel'Thalas, entered into a secret pact with the magocrat lords of Dalaran. The elves told the magocrats about the history of ancient Kalimdor and of the Burning Legion, a history which still threatened the world. They informed the humans that so long as they used magic, they would need to protect their citizenry from the malicious agents of the Legion. The magocrats proposed the notion of empowering a single mortal champion who would utilize their powers in order to fight a never-ending secret war against the Legion. It was stressed that the majority of mankind could never know about the Guardians or the threat of the Legion for fear that they would riot in fear of paranoia. The elves agreed to the proposal and found a secret society that would watch over the selection of the Guardian and help to stem the rise of chaos in the world. The society held its secret meetings in the shadowed Tirisfal Glades, where the High Elves had first settled in Lordaeron. Thus, they named the secret sect the Guardians of Tirisfal. The mortal champions who were chosen to be Guardians were imbued with incredible powers of both elven and human magic. Though there would only ever be one Guardian at a time, they held such vast power that they could single-handedly fight back the Legion's agents wherever they were found in the world. The Guardian power was so great that only the Council of Tirisfal was allowed to choose potential successors to the mantle of guardianship. Whenever a Guardian grew too old or wearied of the secret war against chaos, the Council chose a new champion and, under controlled conditions, formally channeled the Guardian power into its new agent. As the generations passed, Guardians defended the masses of humanity from the invisible threat of the Burning Legion throughout the lands of Erethdor and Kel'Thalas. Erethdor grew and prospered while the use of magic spread throughout the Empire. Meanwhile, the Guardians kept careful watch for signs of demonic activity. Ironforge, the Awakening of the Dwarves. Tanaris, Loch Modan, Ironforge, the Barrens, Mulgore, Blackrock Depths. In the ancient times, after the Titans departed Azeroth, their children, known as the Earthen, continued to shape and guard the deep recesses of the world. The Earthen were largely unconcerned with the affairs of the surface-dwelling races and longed only to plumb the dark depths of the earth. When the world was sundered by the Well of Eternity's implosion, the Earthen were deeply affected. Reeling with the pain of the earth itself, the Earthen lost much of their identity and sealed themselves within the stone chambers where they were first created. Uldaman, Uldum, Ulduar. These were the names of the ancient Titan cities where the Earthen first took shape and form. Buried deep beneath the world, the Earthen rested in peace for nearly 8,000 years. Though it is unclear what awakened them, the Earthen sealed within Uldaman eventually arose from their self-imposed slumber. These Earthen found that they had changed significantly during their hibernation. Their rocky hides had softened and become smooth-skinned, and their powers over stone and earth had waned. They had become mortal creatures. Calling themselves dwarves, the last of the Earthen left the halls of Uldaman and ventured out into the waking world. Still lulled by the safety and wonders of the deep places, they found a vast kingdom under the highest mountain in the land. They named their land Kaz Modan, or Mountain of Kaz, in honor of the Titan shaper Khaz-Garath. Constructing an altar for their Titan father, the dwarves crafted a mighty forge within the heart of the mountain. Thus, the city that grew around the forge would be called Ironforge ever after. The dwarves, by nature fascinated with shaping gems and stone, set out to mine the surrounding mountains for riches and precious minerals. Content with their labors under the world, the dwarves remained isolated from the affairs of their surface-dwelling neighbors. The Seven Kingdoms: Scholomance, Stratholme. Strom continued to act as the central hub of Erethdor, but as with Dalaran, many new city-states arose across the continent of Lordaeron. Gilneas, Alterac, and Kul Tiras were the first city-states to arise, and although they each had their own customs and commercial workings, they all held to the unifying authority of Strom. Under the vigilant watch of the Order of Tirisfal, Dalaran became the chief center of learning for magicians throughout the land. The Magicrats who ruled Dalaran founded the Kirintor, a specialized sect that was charged with cataloging and researching every spell, artifact, and magic item known to mankind at the time. Gilneas and Alterac became strong supporters of Strom and developed mighty armies that explored the mountainous southern lands of Cosmodan. It was during this period that humans first met the ancient race of dwarves and traveled to their cavernous subterranean city of Ironforge. The humans and dwarves shared many secrets of metalsmithing and engineering and discovered a common love for battle and storytelling. The city-state of Kul Tiras, founded upon a large island south of Lordaeron, developed a prosperous economy based on fishing and shipping. Over time, Kul Tiras built a mighty fleet of merchant vessels that sailed throughout the known lands in search of exotic goods to trade and sell. Yet even as the economy of Erethdor flourished, its strongest elements began to disintegrate. In time, the lords of Strom sought to move their estates to the lush northlands of Lordaeron and leave the arid lands of the south. The heirs of the king Thoradin, the last descendants of the Arathi bloodline, argued that Strom should not be abandoned and thus incurred the displeasure of the greater citizenry, who were likewise eager to leave. The lords of Strom, seeking to find purity and enlightenment in the untamed north, decided to leave their ancient city behind. Far to the north of Dalaran, the lords of Strom built a new city-state which they named Lordaeron. The entire continent would take its name from this city-state. Lordaeron became a mecca for religious travelers and those who sought inner peace and security. The descendants of the Arathi, left within the crumbling walls of ancient Strom, decided to travel south past the rocky mountains of Cosmodan. Their journey finally ended after many long seasons, and they settled in the northern region of the continent they would name Azeroth. In a fertile valley, they founded the Kingdom of Stormwind, which quickly became a self-sufficient power in its own right. The few warriors still left in Strom decided to remain and guard the ancient walls of their city. Strom was no longer the center of the empire, but it developed into a new nation known as Stromgarde. Though each of the city-states became prosperous in its own right, the empire of Erethdor had effectively disintegrated. As each nation developed its own customs and beliefs, they became increasingly segregated from one another. King Thoradin's vision of a unified humanity had faded at last. Eowyn and the Dragon Hunt, Westfall, Scarlet Monastery, Tirisfal Glades. As the politics and rivalries of the seven human nations waxed and waned, the line of the Guardians kept its constant vigil against chaos. There were many Guardians over the years, but only one ever held the magical powers of Tirisfal at any given time. One of the last Guardians of the Age distinguished herself as a mighty warrior against the Shadow. Eowyn, a fiery human girl, won the approbation of the Order and was given the mantle of guardianship. Eowyn vigorously worked to hunt down and eradicate demons wherever she found them, but she often questioned the authority of the male-dominated council of Tirisfal. She believed that the ancient elves and elderly men who presided over the council were too rigid in their thinking and not farsighted enough to put a decisive end to the conflict against chaos. Impatiently, with lengthy discussion and debate, she yearned to prove herself worthy to her peers and superiors, and as a result frequently chose valor over wisdom in crucial situations. As her mastery over the cosmic power of Tirisfal grew, Eowyn became aware of a number of powerful demons that stalked the icy northern continent of Northrend. Traveling to the distant north, Eowyn tracked the demons into the mountains. There, she found that the demons were hunting one of the last surviving dragonflights and draining ancient creatures of their innate magic. The mighty dragons, who had fled from the ever-advancing march of mortal societies, found themselves too evenly matched against the dark magics of the Legion. Eowyn confronted the demons, and with the help from the noble dragons, eradicated them. Yet, as the last demon was banished from the mortal world, a great storm erupted throughout the north. An enormous dark visage appeared in the sky above Northrend. Sargeras, the Demon King and Lord of the Burning Legion, appeared before Eowyn and bristled with hellish energy. He informed the young guardian that the time of Tirisfal was about to come to an end, and that the world would soon bow before the onslaught of the Legion. The proud Aegwyn, believing herself to be a match for the menacing god, unleashed her powers against Sargeras' avatar. With disconcerting ease, Aegwyn battered the Demon Lord with her powers and succeeded in killing his physical shell. Fearing that Sargeras' spirit would linger on, Aegwyn locked the ruined husk of his body within one of the ancient halls of Kalimdor that had been blasted to the bottom of the sea when the Well of Eternity collapsed. Aegwyn would never know that she had done exactly as Sargeras had planned. She had inadvertently sealed the fate of the mortal world for Sargeras at the time of his corporeal death, had transferred his spirit into Aegwyn's weakened body. Unbeknownst to the young guardian, Sargeras would remain cloaked within the darkest recess of her soul for many long years. War of the Three Hammers, Red Ridge Mountains, Stormwind City, Ironforge, the Barrens, Mulgore, Scarlet Monastery, the Hinterlands, Blackrock Depths. The dwarves of Ironforge Mountain lived in peace for many long centuries. However, their society grew too large within the confines of their mountain cities. Though the mighty High King, Motimus Anvilmar, ruled over the dwarves with justice and wisdom, three powerful factions had arisen amongst the dwarven society. The Bronzebeard clan, ruled by Thane Madoran Bronzebeard, held close ties to the High King and stood as traditional defenders of the Ironforge Mountain. The Wildhammer clan, ruled by Thane Cardros Wildhammer, inhabited the foothills and crags around the base of the mountain and sought to gain more control within the city. The third faction, the Dark Iron clan, was ruled by the sorcerer Thane Tharazon. The Dark Irons hid within the deepest shadows under the mountain and plotted against both their Bronzebeard and Wildhammer cousins. For a time, the three factions kept a tenuous peace, but tensions erupted when High King Anvilmar passed away from old age. The three ruling clans went to war for control of Ironforge itself. The Dwarf Civil War raged under the earth for many years. Eventually, the Bronzebeards, who had the largest standing army, banished the Dark Irons and Wildhammers from under the mountain. Cardros and his Wildhammer warriors traveled north through the barrier gates of Dun Algaz, and they founded their own kingdom within the distant peak of Grim Batal. There, the Wildhammers thrived and rebuilt their stores of treasure. Tharazon and his Dark Irons did not fare well. Humiliated and enraged by their defeat, they vowed revenge against Ironforge. Leading his people far to the south, Tharazon founded a city, which he named after himself, within the beautiful Red Ridge Mountains. Prosperity and the passing of years did little to ease the Dark Iron's rancor toward their cousins. Tharazon and his sorceress wife, Modgud, launched a two-pronged assault against both Ironforge and Grim Batal. The Dark Irons were intent on claiming all of Cosmodan for their own. The Dark Iron armies smashed against their cousins' strongholds and very nearly took both kingdoms. However, Madoran Bronzebeard ultimately led his clan to a decisive victory over Tharazon's sorceress army. Tharazon and his servants fled back to the safety of their city, unaware of the events transpiring at Grim Batal, where Modgud's army would fare no better against Cardros and his Wildhammer warriors. As she confronted the enemy warriors, Modgud used her powers to strike fear into their hearts. Shadows moved at her command, and dark things crawled up from the depths of the earth to stalk the Wildhammers in their own halls. Eventually, Modgud broke through the gates and laid siege to the fortress itself. The Wildhammers fought desperately, Cardros himself wading through the roiling masses to slay the sorceress queen. With their queen lost, the Dark Irons fled before the fury of the Wildhammers. They raced south towards their king's stronghold, only to meet the armies of Ironforge, which had come to aid Grim Batal. Crushed between two armies, the remaining Dark Iron forces were utterly destroyed. The combined armies of Ironforge and Grim Batal then turned south, intent on destroying Tharazon and his Dark Irons once and for all. They had not gone far when Tharazon's fury resulted in a spell of cataclysmic proportions. Seeking to summon a supernatural minion that would ensure his victory, Tharazon called upon the ancient powers sleeping beneath the world. To his shock, and ultimately his doom, the creature that emerged was more terrible than any nightmare he could have imagined. Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, immortal lord of all fire elementals, had been banished by the Titans when the world was young. Now, freed by Tharazon's call, Ragnaros erupted into being once again. Ragnaros' apocalyptic rebirth into Azeroth shattered the Red Ridge Mountains and created a raging volcano at the center of the devastation. The volcano, known as Blackrock Mountain, was bordered by the Searing Gorge to the north and the Burning Steppes to the south. Though Tharazon was killed by the forces he had unleashed, His surviving brethren were ultimately enslaved by Ragnaros and his elementals. They remain within the depths of Blackrock to this day. Witnessing the horrific devastation and the fires spreading across the southern mountains, King Madoran and King Cardros halted their armies and hastily turned back towards their kingdoms, unwilling to face the awesome wrath of Ragnaros. The Bronzebeards returned to Ironforge and rebuilt their glorious city. The Wildhammers also returned home to Grim Batal. However, the death of the Modgood had left an evil stain on the mountain's fortress, and the Wildhammers found it uninhabitable. They were bitter in their hearts over the loss of their beloved home. King Bronzebeard offered the Wildhammers a place to live within the borders of Ironforge, but the Wildhammers steadfastly refused. Cardros took his people north towards the lands of Lordaeron. Settling within the lush forests of the hinterlands, the Wildhammers crafted the city of Airy Peak, where the Wildhammers grew closer to nature and even bonded with the mighty griffins of the area. Seeking to retain relations and trade with their cousins, the dwarves of Ironforge constructed two massive arches, the Thandal Span, to bridge the gap between Cosmodan and Lordaeron. Bolstered by mutual trade, the two kingdoms prospered. After the deaths of Madoran and Cardros, their sons jointly commissioned two great statues in honor of their fathers. The two statues would stand guard over the pass into the Southlands, which had become volcanic in the wake of Ragnaros' scorching presence. They served as both a warning to all who would attack the Dwarven kingdoms, and as a reminder of what price the Dark Irons paid for their crimes. The two kingdoms retained close ties for some years, but the Wildhammers were much changed by the horrors they witnessed at Grim Batal. They took to living above ground on the slopes of Airy Peak instead of carving a vast kingdom within the mountain. The ideological differences between the two remaining Dwarven clans eventually led to their parting of ways. The Last Guardian, Westfall, Loch Modan. The Guardian Eowyn grew powerful over the years and used the Tirisfal energies to greatly extend her life. Foolishly, believing that she had defeated Sargeras for good, she continued to safeguard the world from the Demon King's minions for nearly 900 years. However, the Council of Tirisfal finally decreed that her stewardship had come to an end. The council ordered Eowyn to return to Dalaran so they could choose a new successor for the Guardian power. Yet Eowyn, ever distrustful of the council, decided to choose a successor on her own. The proud Eowyn planned to give birth to a son whom she would divest her power. She had no intention of allowing the Order of Tirisfal to manipulate her successor as they tried to manipulate her. Traveling to the southern nation of Azeroth, Eowyn found the perfect man to father her son, a skilled human magician known as Nihilus Aran. Aran was the court conjurer and advisor for Azeroth's king. Eowyn seduced the magician and conceived a son by him. Nihilus' natural affinity for magic would run deep within the unborn child and define the tragic steps the child would later take. The power of Tirisfal was also implanted in the child, yet it wasn't to awaken until he reached physical maturity. Time passed, and Eowyn gave birth to her son in a secluded grove, naming the boy Medivh, which means keeper of secrets in the High Elven tongue. Eowyn believed that the boy would mature to become the next guardian. Unfortunately, the malignant spirit of Sargeras, which had been hiding inside her, had possessed the defenseless child while it was still in her womb. Eowyn had no idea that the world's newest guardian was already possessed by its greatest nemesis. Certain that her baby was healthy and sound, Eowyn delivered young Medivh to the court of Azeroth and left him there to be raised by his mortal father and his people. She then wandered into the wilderness and prepared to pass into whatever afterlife awaited her. Medivh grew to become a strong boy and had no idea of the potential power of his Tirisfallen birthright. Sargeras bided his time until the youth's power manifested itself. By the time Medivh had reached his teenage years, he had become very popular in Azeroth for his magical prowess and often went off on adventures with his two friends, Lane, the Prince of Azeroth, and Anduin Lothar, one of the last descendants of the Arathi bloodline. The three boys constantly caused mischief around the kingdom, but they were well liked by the general citizenry. When Medivh reached the age of 14, the cosmic power inside him awakened and clashed with the pervasive spirit of Sargeras that lurked within his soul. Medivh fell into a catatonic state which lasted for many years. When he awakened from his coma, he found that he had grown to adulthood, and his friends Lane and Anduin had become the regents of Azeroth. Though he wished to use his incredible newfound powers to protect the land he called home, the dark spirit of Sargeras twisted his thoughts and emotions towards an insidious end. Sargeras reveled within the darkening heart of Medivh, for he knew that his plans for the second invasion of the world were nearing completion, and that the world's last guardian would bring them all to fruition. And that is the end of Chapter 2. Thank you very much for watching and or listening. Give it a like, give it a comment, give it a subscribe, and I will see you for Chapter 3. But if you missed Chapter 1, I'll put a link on the screen or in the description below. Okay? Okay. See ya.